Hello, and welcome to Monster Island Radio, a show where we discuss one of our favourite movie franchises, Godzilla. Each episode, we pick a movie from the series and talk about the highlights, lowlights, and everything in between, and why Godzilla is one of our favourite monsters. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Monster Island Radio. I'm Ben, and as always, I'm joined by...
Graham! Ooh. It's me, Graham.
Hello!
Remember me?
From the last episode, right?
That's right.
Right, today we're talking about 2016's Shin Godzilla, which did I buy that for your birthday last year, I think?
It was a leaving present when I left the job which we used to work at together, but we don't anymore. So, I mean, we figured it'd probably be time to, actually cover this movie, because you've had it for quite a while now, and we've been you've been saving it for doing an episode, so we'll break up the Millennium era that we've been doing, and we'll cover Shin Godzilla. It's nice to have a little breather, especially for people who are like Godzilla but might not necessarily be interested in Millennium at this exact moment in time.
Yeah, exactly. So, as always, for those who haven't seen it, I've written a bit of a synopsis. It's quite long, actually. I think they're getting longer and longer each episode we do. I think the first one was about 2 sentences. Now it's about 5 paragraphs.
Oh,
well, maybe not that long, but let's get started. Right, so we open with the Tokyo Bay Coast Guard investigating a leisure boat that was abandoned off of the bay, with some research and writings found aboard. The boat belonged to Goro Maki, who was something of a shamed professor studying radiation mutations, and hailed from Odo Island, which is the fictitious island from 1954 Godzilla. Although this movie actually has nothing to do with 54 Godzilla. This is
it's as though Godzilla has never appeared before.
Yeah, this is
Shin
his first
Godzilla.
appearance,
Yeah.
Exactly. Shortly after, a collapsed tunnel by Tokyo Bay prompts investigation by the Japanese government to determine the cause, with one possible explanation suggested by government official Rando Higuchi to be caused by a large aquatic animal. Despite the idea being dismissed by the cabinet, it's quickly revealed via social media and news reports that a huge tail rises out of the bay, thus confirming Higuchi's initial theory. Things escalate quickly as the creature comes ashore, despite government statements saying it wouldn't, and it wrecks the nearby town. At this point, we only have a creature that resembles a disgusting googly-eyed fish with legs, but it's not long before it stands on its hind legs and starts walking around like Rory Calhoun and making a familiar roaring sound. Higuchi heads up a special task force made up of outcasts and creative thinkers to figure out how to deal with the new threat, while the military make futile attempts to halt the creature before it retreats back to the sea. The team call upon Maki's research to help identify what they're dealing with, as it foresaw the events unfolding before them. When the creature returns again, we said that it's evolved to twice the size into the form we all know, Godzilla. As military defenses ramp up, so does the ferocity of Godzilla as he blasts Tokyo with a devastating atomic breath in self-defense. So Higuchi's task force analysed Goro Maki's research further, as well as samples of DNA from Godzilla, to conclude that he is continuously evolving and has the ability to self-replicate, and that the only way to stop it is by freezing him. So with the help of other nations' contributions, the team managed to facilitate the operation to halt Godzilla and inject him with a freezing agent. The plan works right before Godzilla was about to evolve for the 5th time, where we see a mouth at the end of his tail with humanoid figures growing out of it. So even though that was quite long, it's still a sort of truncated version of the plot, because there's quite a lot to unpack. I've really left quite a lot out. And I think it really took me a couple of watches to get what was happening, because the dialogue was so fast-paced and heavy. It's quite difficult to wrap my brain around, and I'm the first to admit what I know about Japanese politics could probably fit on a postage stamp. So it was to begin with, it was quite a difficult watch, because I was quite fortunate that I got to see it in the cinema when I first saw it. And I do remember thinking that for the majority of it, Godzilla was practically a statue. I mean, it wasn't what I was expecting. It doesn't mean I necessarily disliked it, but it's just not what I was expecting. So I'm just wondering, was it what you were expecting? What were you expecting?
Well, going into it, I just from my observations of the Godzilla design in Shin Godzilla, it seemed like they were going for a much more raw kind of approach to Godzilla, kind of more dramatic, whereas the actual result of the movie is that although Godzilla himself does pose a very like dramatic kind of, he's a very dramatic sort of figure in the movie, and the way he behaves is kind of more realistic in some respects than other movies. The bulk of the film is kind of like this sort of political satire that's maybe not the funniest, but definitely kind of like, yeah, I guess if Godzilla came along now, this is sort of how the government would react, at least maybe in Japan. And that is very interesting. It's like a different kind of approach to Godzilla that we haven't really seen in other movies, not at least on the ones we've covered recently. So that was really, really interesting. I found it, really entertaining for that.
I don't know if it was supposed to be humorous. Do you think it was?
I think that's kind of the general like feeling from stuff I've read online after I watched it. I mean, I didn't get that it was satire myself, but it kind of felt like there was a sort of critical edge to the way the government moved quite slowly on Godzilla, and there's supposed to be like a dark humour to that, I think.
Oh, right, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
so it's not like laugh out loud funny, but it's certainly kind of, it's sort of a knowing kind of like the government are not going to protect you quickly enough when something like this occurs, and that seemed to be the general sort of message of the movie. Although they did ultimately save the day, so whatever.
They didn't as such, did they?
No, but the singular, what's his character's name?
Higuchi.
It's Rando Higuchi.
Yeah.
He does, and he works from within the government. The government is very much like, the world, the United Nations and the outside governments are pressuring Japan to just nuke Godzilla and get rid of him. And then there's a lot of theorizing from the scientists in the movies that might not even work, or it's just going to cause another kind of period of nuclear kind of reaction in Japan. It's going to affect their culture like it did before, and that's where Godzilla comes from and all that stuff. Higuchi, he sort of spearheads this plan to freeze Godzilla as a kind of like nuclear coolant sort of idea, and that's what ultimately destroys Shin Godzilla. But I mean, in terms of my expectations, I think my expectations weren't greatly specific, except I thought Godzilla himself might be more unpleasant in this film than he normally is. He's kind of always, even when he's destroying cities, it's kind of nasty, but it's fun to watch. Whereas in this one, it's a lot more kind of, it is kind of realistic in a way. And although I feel like Godzilla does too much standing around being statuesque, which I didn't really like, when he does perform his actions, it really services the movies and makes you think, what would this really be like? So I liked that quite a bit.
The what you're saying about it being a like a critical satire of the like how the Japanese government would handle things, as most Godzilla movies are. They're always a vehicle for a parable or something to do with Japan or any culturally significant event and the way the nation responds and deals with it. And I'm presuming, it seems pretty obvious to me that, I mean, the most recent nuclear event in Japanese history was in 2011 with the Fukushima nuclear disaster. And, what better vehicle for telling a radiation story than Godzilla, right? So
it's kind of a unfortunate situation where you're like, oh, the Godzilla movie has become richer. The price of that is a nuclear disaster.
It's kind of awful.
But they need something to kind of happen almost so that they can have a fresh parable, like you're saying. Rather than just retreading the same thing.
Because I think that's why this one was so different, because there was a lot of criticism from the public in Japan about how it was all handled and how the bureaucracy and red tape that exists in Japan's infrastructure kind of stifled any sufficient action in that crisis. So this was like, the perfect movie to do it, essentially. But I mean, like I was saying, at the time when I was watching it, I wasn't thinking about that, because I suppose I was going off the back of 2014 Godzilla, the US one.
This came out a couple of years after that.
So, and I was like, oh, here we go, action movie. And it's like, it's not really an action movie at all.
Well, it doesn't even have a second monster. There's no like kaiju battle at all.
No.
Because my girlfriend was like, oh yeah, should we watch Shin Godzilla a few weeks ago? And I was like, oh yeah, we could watch it. I'm supposed to do that for the podcast soon. And I said to her, it doesn't have a battle in it. And she was just like, oh, no, don't want to watch it. It's just like, just not interested, because she was like, she wanted to watch, like you say, she wanted to watch an action movie.
Yeah.
That was why we wanted to put it on. So we watched something else. But yeah, it's a different kind of movie, which is great, because there are so many Godzilla movies, and we watch so many which are similar, that as a bit of counter, programming, I really, really liked it. But I can totally get why going into the cinema not really knowing fully what you're going to get, it might be a bit like stagnant for you. Because that was the worst thing about it, is that Godzilla, for all the destruction it causes, stands around a lot doing nothing for big chunks of the movie. So yeah, that's kind of like, it doesn't have a strong personality as Godzilla itself.
This is the thing, like, you don't really kind of connect with him in any way.
No, and even in the finale, when he's being like shot at so they can like pour this freezing agent into its mouth, it just sort of stands there being vaguely indestructible. Yeah. So yeah, it's the one major flaw, I think, of an otherwise really high quality film.
So with this Godzilla, he's not the result of a bomb this time round. He's the result of radioactive waste, which I read subsequently, but I didn't notice actually in the movie. But they're saying that it was radioactive waste from the US. I don't know if that was some sort of, if that's actually related to anything that's actually happened.
Well, I know that obviously the US did a lot of nuclear testing in the Pacific, didn't they? So maybe
it could be some of that.
But I don't know about them dumping their own material in there.
I'm not sure.
That's something that's going on in real life. I mean, that would be something that they definitely would want to keep quiet. But yeah, I don't know if it was fictitious or not. I just kind of took it was sort of like general nuclear waste.
Yeah, that's what I assumed, to be honest.
I watched the Japanese version with this one. Normally when we do these podcasts, I watch the English one just because that's what's easier for me to watch, because I don't like read particularly quickly, to be honest with you. So subtitles are an investment for me.
And this one's a particularly difficult one to read.
Yeah, it was, because you mentioned at the start that they talk really rapidly in this. The film's directed by Hideaki Anno, who's famous for Neon Genesis Evangelion, but he commented that one of the things he wanted this film to replicate the sort of dialogue style that you see in The Social Network, the David Fincher movie. Have you seen that?
Right, yeah, I have seen that. Yeah,
they talk so rapidly, don't they?
Yeah.
So it's a deliberate,
it's like a Gilmore Girls episode.
Yeah, I suppose so. They just talk so fast, and it's on purpose, just so it makes you feel like things are happening rapidly in a very exciting way. And they seem to it's like in the scenes with the scientist where they're coming up with the freezing stuff and they're doing lots of fast cutting, it's reminiscent of both The Social Network and Evangelion, because of that rapid nature. Whereas in the kind of the more sort of critical government scenes at the beginning, where they're sort of like, what should we do? Those are significantly slower, so it's a definite contrast there.
I still think even those were quite quick, to be honest.
Fair enough.
But then, I mean, you have to kind of keep it interesting, because what it boils down to is essentially a political drama featuring Godzilla. So
the thing I didn't like about the subtitles was that there's a lot of text on screen in this movie anyway,
especially when it says which room they're in and what the person's name is and what it is they do while you're trying to read what they're saying. You're like, whoa.
Yeah, and the subtitles bounce between the top and the bottom of the screen, and you're just like, okay. And sometimes,
and then when someone speaks English, it goes to with the Japanese text at the side. What's happening?
So yeah, I wasn't incapable of reading the subs, but it definitely wasn't more challenging, than I expected. As soon as the movie started, I was like, okay, I've really got to pay attention to this, because, it was so rapid.
I mean, I've never really been one for political drama, to be completely honest with you.
Right.
Like, it's not really my thing. Maybe I'm just not cultured enough to
it's just a matter of taste,
find it interesting enough for me. But I do think it succeeded for me, because it did actually kind of give me an insight into what the bureaucracy in Japan is like, that whole kind of, depending on what conversation they're having, they'll have a meeting in a different room with mostly the same people, and like how you got the that military chief like requesting from the defense minister, oh yeah, we need to do this, and then she requests to the prime minister, like, we need to do this, and then it goes back again, like they're all sat in the same room. And it's this weird kind of hierarchical structure of, we have to go through procedure. And it's like they really do push it home to prove that point.
I think watching this 5 years after Fukushima in Japan as a Japanese audience, that would have been quite darkly comical. Just from our perspective, it's sort of like a bit stagnant, but it's stagnant on purpose. That is the joke. So yeah, it's really interesting in that way. But yeah, in terms of like drama, I mean, personally, I really like The Social Network, as we mentioned it. Like, I think that's a great movie. It's you know, it's a good example of taking something that could be potentially quite dull and making it seem very exciting. But then I think it's just a case of when the drama's good, it's good, and when it's not good, it's not. So it's not even about whether it's political or not. You just have to find something that resonates with you.
Yeah. The thing is, I do try and figure out what resonated with me with this movie. It's like I did enjoy it. It's a weird one because I didn't really feel like I was connecting to any of the characters or Godzilla, and like on a personal level. I mean, I don't live in Japan. I didn't know what the disaster was like. I could only imagine how horrific it was. I felt like such a third party just kind of looking in on this.
Yeah.
And anytime you do see any kind of Western influence in this movie, it's like with the Americans in there, like you hardly ever see their face or anything like that. And I really did feel like an outsider. Not necessarily that they wanted anyone from the West to feel like an outsider, but it's just like I was just so acutely aware that I don't think it was made for me as such.
The scene with the American generals is so anime to me.
I thought that as well.
There's just these three guys just staring out of three separate windows and just talking to each other without making any eye contact.
Yeah, it was so bizarre. But yeah, I mean, so we didn't really have any. I mean, we did have main characters that we were supposed to, empathize with. So you got Rando Higuchi, who's the aide to the Prime Minister, Kayako and Patterson, who's that US envoy.
US.
Yeah, well, we'll get onto that. And Hideaki Akasaka, who's like a special advisor to the Prime Minister. And they're all a bit tropey, really. So, I mean, you got Randa, who's like the young hero. He's a bit more switched on than his peers believe him to be. Kayako, with the sassy American attitude and the weird accent. We'll get onto that in a second. And then, you've got Goromaki, who was, I mean, he wasn't even in the movie. There's a picture of him and that's it. But he's like the old wise one. He's kind of the the unseen version of Bryan Cranston's character, I suppose, in 2014 Godzilla. He's like obsessed with radiation mutations and foreseeing the events that were occurring. And like I said, because I didn't really connect with them as such. I didn't dislike them at all, actually. I think they were perfectly fine. But I suppose this movie isn't about the characters at all, really. Like it could literally be any characters in there. It didn't really make a difference because that's not what it's about. But it's just there were some odd choices to make Kayako, who was supposedly American with like a Japanese grandmother, and they decided that she can only she's only got like a passing knowledge of Japan, but can speak perfectly fluent Japanese, but then slips into this really kind of quasi-American accent to say these bizarre lines. And it was so jarring because it's like I could sort of believe it until she was made to speak English.
I'm guessing you've read about the actress and all that stuff.
Well, only a little bit. I did read that she found it so hard it made her want to cry. And it's like, what? Get someone that can speak English then. It just seems so insane to make her do this. And maybe to them, it sounded perfectly fine. But I think to anyone outside of Japan, they'd be like, struggling to understand what it was she was even saying. When you first hear her speaking, I actually don't know what she said. I don't have a clue. I know it was in English, but I have no idea. And then she's saying about wanting to find a Zara to find new clothes, and it's like, oh, okay, it's this kind of pastiche of how Americans are perceived outside of America.
She was the closest thing to comic relief in that respect, I suppose.
Oh, that's mean. Or do you mean in an intentional way? Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. I don't mean, I mean, the actress, what's her, Satomi Ishihara, she said, that she took the role and didn't know that she was going to be speaking English for most of the movie, so it's not really her fault.
It's just brutal.
Yeah, I would lay this down at the door of Hideaki Anno, who directed it, because like I said about him being one of the creators of Neon Genesis Evangelion, that's a series where it's very kaiju based. There's basically kaiju fight scenes in every episode of the anime, and it's a sort of world spanning issue, and they have characters in there who are not Japanese but come to Japan and speak Japanese. Obviously, if you're watching the dub, they're all speaking English, but one of the major characters in Evangelion is German, but she comes to Japan and she's fluent in Japanese. It's just like part of the style of like encapsulating the entire world, and I think that in Shin Godzilla is an obvious kind of, that's like his input. So it probably was one of his choices, like, oh, we need somebody here who's not from Japan but brings something from America or whatever. But when you look at it from a Japanese perspective, if you have a character in there who's speaking a lot of English, having them speak English with a heavy Japanese accent probably means it's very easy for Japanese viewers to understand it, even with or without subtitles, because even though she's kind of struggling to phonetically speak these lines, it probably is a more common sound to their ear. So perhaps. I think this whole movie is just like, it's just a very, very full Japan kind of thing.
I did think that, because Toho, they really liked 2014 Godzilla, which was obviously aimed at Western audiences, and they're probably like, yeah, that's great. They've done their thing for American audiences. Let's do another one for Japan. And I really just got that vibe, and I suppose that comes back to that whole, almost feeling a disconnect with this movie, because I just felt like an outsider. So yeah, it's very Japan centric, but I mean that's hardly surprising. It's a Godzilla film, of course. It's going to be Japan centric.
And I quite liked the outsider feeling. I took that as
same,
part
actually.
of a positive. So I'm not saying I don't think any of us think it was a negative. That it kind of was isolating. I think the isolating feeling was almost like part of it.
Yeah, I think I just have a terrible way of phrasing things, because when I say like I felt like an outsider, it just sounds like, wow, you really didn't like this. It's like, no, I did. I actually enjoyed it. It's just the way I come across, I think.
I don't think it's your phrasing, but I think that as a term would have a negative connotation.
Yeah.
Whereas it's just, this movie is so unique in terms of kind of twisting that it's not a horror movie. And like I said at the start, I was kind of expecting it to be more horrific, but it kind of has that element where it makes you feel uneasy in an entertaining way.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was very, very strongly done. It's very good.
Yeah, I think this is probably the most terrifying iteration of Godzilla, I think.
Yeah, I would say so.
Because nothing could stop him, but he was just moving so slowly. It's like he wasn't even aware what was happening. He's like just like a lost creature. And, it's like, well, what's it going to do next? You have no idea, because you see it, evolving. Because when we first see it, it's just a tail, essentially.
Yeah.
And then it comes to land, and it's got its googly eyes, and it's, flopping around, and then it stands up on its hind legs, and then we hear the roar and all that. We just see it getting bigger and bigger. And it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
Even though he's not doing that much, he's still causing like such havoc. And it's like, well, if he was going to really get pissed off, you're going to see something horrendous, and that's what we do see. So when those stealth bombers from the US come and drop a bomb on him, he's like, right, that's it. Something's trying to attack me here. And that's when we get that part where he splits open his jaw and does the atomic breath, and it's just this, like, probably one of the most devastating atomic breath scenes ever.
I would say it probably is the most impactful one, because it's played totally straight.
Yeah.
When we watch the Legendary Pictures movies, and it looks great with their kind of CG Godzilla, they look fantastic, and it's very exciting. You're waiting for it, you're building up. They have that like sound effect with their spine, like builds up the power and all that stuff. This is much more like I wouldn't say the effects are totally successful in representing what it would be like, but it makes you feel emotionally like this is what it would be like if this happened.
Yeah, so I think partly due to the fact he's not actually attacking another kaiju, he's attacking a city.
He's just defending himself, just aimlessly defending himself, and that kind of lost creature thing, which you touched on, is probably the strongest connection you have to this Godzilla, because he's just lost in the city and just sort of like, I'm just here, I don't know what's going on, I'm going to defend myself. And yeah, it's kind of, they're not really, there's no anger really towards Godzilla as a creature so much. It's not emotional in that way, but it's emotional in kind of like almost
what's going to happen.
It's like a strong sort of melancholy, like kind of hopelessness, which is really kind of how you must feel when if a nuclear disaster like Fukushima happens and things escalate very rapidly, but you can't really get in there and be hands-on with nuclear stuff. Yeah. So I think they're very successful in replicating the emotions of that situation from, an observant outsider point of view.
Yeah, because it seems like no matter what they do, nothing seems to be working. And when they think it does work, it ends up coming back to bite them hard. Pretty terrifying.
In terms of the effects...
Right.
I wouldn't say they're world class.
They're serviceable.
Yeah, they are definitely
saying it like I could do better.
The thing is with them is that at the start, when you first see what I would guess you would call like fish Godzilla or like quadruped Godzilla, when he's sort of like, sliming around the city, sort of like, on his belly.
Yeah.
I thought that was a practical effect where they actually had a full suit and they just composited it into a city and had a great amount of extras and nice bit of city destruction.
A guy laying on his belly, wriggling around.
I really thought it was just a practical performance. I thought that looks great.
Okay. And
then, as the movie went on and they added in more CG stuff, I was like, oh no, this is actually like CG. So it was only for like when the first reveal shot, when you see him down the street and it's kind of looking, from afar, I was like, wow, that's great. But very quickly after that, when he comes towards the camera and he kind of discharges its coolant, that kind of red blood like liquid pours out of it, and it hits the pavement, that just looks like a really kind of stock particle effect where they've done kind of the bare minimum sort of.
And especially when he starts to evolve, because you see his skin ripple.
Yeah,
and it feels like you're watching like Stargate SG-1 or something.
For me, it was specifically when that liquid kind of came and hit the ground. You could just kind of see like it's not really interacting with the pavement; it's just a particle effect. It's like it's a liquid effect you see a lot. Like if you watch a lot of movies, you kind of get like, oh yeah, that's like CG liquid. So yeah, it wasn't kind of on a Hollywood level, even though it sounds a bit patronising. But definitely, like when you watch a lot of ILM movies or Weta Digital movies, they're a bit cleaner than this. And it was the particle effect let it down when the buildings were being destroyed and crumbling. You could see like it's just a particle effect applied to the building, so it could just fall, and it was all simulated. It wasn't like it didn't really feel particularly real.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I could adjust to it.
Yeah, I didn't mind it. I just sort of acknowledged it and moved on.
Yeah.
But it was one of the weaker elements of the film.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is probably the first Japanese one where there isn't a suit involved.
Well, it kind of isn't a traditional suit, but they did a lot of motion capture.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it kind of isn't. They've sort of got a nice middle ground where it's like you can have a much better effect in some respects, having the full CG suit, this full CG creature lets you do different things, but they still have the human element on the sound stage. So,
which
is a nice middle ground.
Yeah, I agree. Apparently they did do some full suit stuff, but it never got used. So I heard. I could be wrong on that, but I did recall reading that somewhere. So I guess it just didn't fit with the rest of the movie. And
it makes sense you'd at least do a test.
Yeah, I suppose so. And like they did the same in King of the Monsters as well, the legendary one.
Oh, right.
They did a whole bit with animatronics and stuff, but they cut it. It's a bit like
is it on the Blu-ray?
No.
No.
I
would watch it.
So yeah, I always feel sad when I read that kind of thing. So yeah, the motion capture is the good in between, I think.
Just to comment on the director one last time, I was thinking about Evangelion when I was watching Shin Godzilla, and I didn't know until afterwards that it had been directed by the same guy. And it's in these scenes, in these scientific discussions where they cut very rapidly and they're like kind of shooting bits of paper across the table and pointing at maps, and they do lots of quick cuts, and it's these montages with dialogue over the top, and they do a lot of that in Evangelion. But in animation, you can compose them very carefully and make sure that they're pitch perfect before they're finalized, and every little scene and detail is just artistically done, and you really get that feeling like, oh, these characters are smart and they're doing their thing and they can do it well, fast, great. Mm-hmm. In this movie though, I just found that really choppy and unrefined, and I felt like they're trying to copy what you see in animes like Evangelion, but in this movie I just didn't feel it at all. I just found it really unrefined and I didn't like it, and I was like, it's not conveying what it's trying to convey.
I've never seen Evangelion or Evangelion.
That's why I wanted to ask you.
So
having not seen it,
I wouldn't have even drawn that contrast. So to me, it just seemed like they're just doing their thing. And
did you like that style then?
Yeah. I didn't dislike it. It fit the movie, I thought.
Yeah, it didn't do it for me, is what I mean. But yeah, if you liked it, maybe it was just like less distracting. I can't say if I hadn't seen Evangelion, if I would have thought about it in that respect. But it didn't really do it for me. That's the thing. They do there's 2 or 3 sequences which are just like that, and I was like, well,
To be honest, that completely washed over me. I didn't even think about it.
That's interesting. But like we said before, you're always on top of the sound, and then I'm always thinking about the editing. So
that's true, actually.
It's a different perspective, I guess.
Yeah. Thinking about the sound for a second, they were saying that they tried to create a new roar for him, but it just didn't match up to the original roar. Each time he evolved, it was a different roar.
Right.
When he first stands on his hind legs, that's the 54 roar. And then the fourth form is the like Showa era, like so the like 50s to the 70s movies roar. And then just as he's getting frozen, he then has the Heisei era roar, like just as he's about to go to his fifth form. I thought it was quite a nice little nod, you know, as the franchise was evolving. There's that parallel with Godzilla evolving.
Yeah, so it's quite smart.
Yeah, it's quite nice. And there's like a mixture of the original scores by Ikefube, as well as the new score. And I think that composer did Evangelion, actually. I seem to recall. And I think
it's very similar, actually.
And I think because I think some of the music from Evangelion is in this movie.
Oh, okay. Well, I just watched.
So it's kind of a mixture of all of these things, and I think it kind of married up quite well.
I just watched the showreel, the special effects showreel on the Blu-ray before we started recording, and that has music over it, like I was saying, and it sounds very Evangelion-ish. So yeah, wouldn't be surprised if they were similar to a fault sort of thing.
It was a good mixture of the old and the new, I thought there.
Yeah, I'll sound like a contrarian, but when the first roar happened, I felt like it didn't quite fit the face of the monster when he was evolving. But I still liked
with the googly
sound.
eyes.
I didn't mind. Yeah, I felt like he deserved like his own sound. The googly eyes didn't bother me so much, but it's
funny. Like the googly eyes, I thought it was hilarious when I first saw it because I didn't really realize it was supposed to be like a fish.
Right. Yeah.
I sound like such a heretic. When I talk about Godzilla, I'll be like, oh yeah, I thought it was funny when I first saw it. It's like, does this guy even like Godzilla? I do, rest assured. But yeah, just seeing those eyes, I was like, what? Is he going to have those eyes throughout this entire movie?
That's kind of why I thought it was a suit for at first.
Because they just stuck the eyeballs on.
Yeah, they're not articulated. And I was like, well, that's probably a suit. But then there's probably multiple layers to that design choice then, where they wanted to make it look like a fish.
Yeah, exactly.
They know it's going to evolve at some point anyway. And also you get that bottom layer of like, people might mistake this for a practical effect, if only for a split second, like I did. So yeah, it's an interesting choice. I quite liked it. I mean, it would have been interesting to see a version where they were sort of looking around, but there was none of that on the special effects behind the scenes. So.
Initially, they wanted to have Godzilla start as, the Godzilla we know, that kind of final design, and then for it to evolve into something really weird and just like bizarre. But then Toho vetoed it, and they were like, no, he has to turn into Godzilla.
That's a good choice, I think. I mean,
I think so. I think that it was a good compromise because at the end there was that kind of hint that there was going to be more than this. They still managed to sneak in their idea of having where you see his tail and it's got the humanoid forms coming out, and they've like all those little forms have the dorsal plates on their back and stuff like that, and there's like the head at the end of Godzilla's tail, and stuff like that, and it's like, oh my god, what the hell was going to happen next? They just saved the day in time kind of thing. Yeah,
the unanswered question there is perhaps more interesting than whatever answer they would have come up with.
Yeah, I mean, there was some design sketches and stuff probably quite early on of another Godzilla basically growing out of his back and would end up becoming two Godzillas and stuff like that.
Right.
So I think that's where they started that with the head and the tail, which kind of explains why he could shoot the atomic breath out of his tail as well at one point, because there was a mouth there, which is like it's just horrific, just really grotesque, and I really liked it.
At the final shot, you mean, when they show the close up of the tail?
Yeah, and it's just to see what was going to happen. Actually, speaking about just Godzilla himself, even when he did evolve to his fourth form, I still thought, it was just grotesque, but in a good way.
It genuinely kind of put me off the movie when I first saw the posters for this.
Oh, really?
Back in 2016.
I remember reading at the time when the posters came out, everyone was like, "Oh, what is that?"
That's kind of what I felt like, but then I didn't. This is the thing: is it wasn't kind of communicated in the poster. I mean, how would you do this? I don't know, but they're not telling you like you're supposed to feel sickened by this thing,
right?
Because we're so used to seeing Godzilla as sort of like a devastating but fun character. And this guy's not like that. He is kind of gross on purpose, and it was the on purpose part that I needed to kind of let that click and be like, okay, I'm not supposed to be like, oh, what a fun guy. So yeah, it was just kind of getting to that point as a viewer, I suppose. But yeah, it's a really good design. It's just a shame it doesn't move that much. It reminded me of when we went to see the little Godzilla statue in Tokyo.
Well, it was completely still.
Yeah, we're like, wow, this movie stars the statue that we saw. It's amazing. Because where was that statue? There's like it's
by the
small.
Toho cinemas.
Oh, okay, right, yeah. It's tiny. When you think that Godzilla statue is going to be at least like 9 feet tall, right? But it's like minuscule.
There is a statue of that of Shin Godzilla somewhere.
Oh, right.
We didn't get to go see it though. I didn't know it was there until after the fact.
Something to go back to.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously you've got that head, haven't you, in Shinjuku?
Yes.
You can go up and see the head on that hotel, but we saw from the street level. Yeah. We didn't go up to the...
So, going back to the characters, I suppose. We have the ragtag misfits, you know.
I liked it in this movie, though. It didn't feel too...
It wasn't too bad, because I think it kind of had a purpose, because there was... I don't know if you heard of the Fukushima 50.
I have heard that term, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the people that stayed back to help with the disaster. You know, they were like in there. Yeah, they're on the front line. That's kind of what these guys are like.
Yeah, in a way, we didn't really get a connection with any of the foot soldiers, the people who go in and try to pour this coolant into Godzilla's mouth. A lot of them die. Yeah. But not a single one of them is a named character, so it would have been nice to put somebody who we knew there. That could have been a plus.
Yeah, because there were so many characters there, maybe they felt like it'd be too much to actually focus on all the individuals.
But yeah, it just goes back to that kind of like almost newsreel-esque kind of like outsider vision.
And I don't know if with Rando and Kayako, whether there was like this like a quasi-romantic...
Yes, because you can't get through a single movie these days without there being at least the suggestion of romance. It feels like...
I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt and say maybe there was none of that in there. None of that was intentional, but I don't know. I just got the feeling. I don't know, maybe I'm just assuming incorrectly. Maybe not. I don't know.
It's hard not to, though, because so often you do watch movies and then you get like the attractive male lead and the attractive female lead, and they always get pushed together, even in the most
regardless of the circumstance.
Yeah, so even when it's not happening, you still feel like it's happening sometimes.
I would like to think it's just, you know, for the sake of representation, but I don't think it is. I think it is like it was meant to be hinting at a romantic intention.
Yeah, it's box office stuff, isn't it? It's like, oh, you know, they basically this isn't my opinion, but I wouldn't be surprised if the people who made the movie at Toho were like, oh, well, you know, some girlfriends are going to be dragged along to see this film, so we better put something in there for them. And granted, the only hint at romance really comes in the final scene to me, but it's still there, and you're just sort of like, yeah, okay, I guess this is fine. I really liked the stoic kind of subdued female scientist. I can't remember what her name was, but she's the one who kind of like comes up with a lot of the ideas.
The one who speaks really quickly and doesn't smile until the end.
She's my kind of lady. Yeah, so that was great.
No, she was good. Yeah.
In terms of like the character stuff, if it had been up to me, there's a scene in this film where you do see a block of flats kind of getting destroyed, and there are some people in the
inside
who get killed.
Yeah.
And I would have, to kind of, you know, drive home the unpleasantness of this Godzilla and his destruction, I would have maybe just done a couple of 60-second vignettes, like sprinkle them out throughout the movie, maybe 2 or 3, where you get to see a character just like that in the apartment, where, you know, she has 1 or 2 lines where she's just saying like, you know, we've got to get out, you know, get this on, leave that behind. Then they die. All you need is just a little bit of connection. You know, there's some guy in a car gets crushed.
Essentially, there was only 2 moments like that. That one there, and then I think there was another shot where there was a load of rubble, and you see someone's like foot poking out, and they died under the rubble. And I did feel like those moments were quite impactful, and a few more of those, like you say, would have added to that kind of street level terror.
Yeah, I feel like there's a high art to introducing a character and killing them off like 60 seconds later and making you feel something. I know that's very hard to do, but if they had 2 or 3 things like that, it's just like when there's that scene where they're saying, oh, we can't fire on Godzilla because there's this old man and his like elderly mother like crossing the train tracks.
A close-up of those 2 would have been good.
Just a line
like
of dialogue.
Maybe saying something to each other. Yeah,
because the shot of them, no joke, is less than a second.
Yeah.
And it's just like, blink and you miss it, literally. So,
And I think on the second watch, that's when I got this movie more, because these things are like inferred but never explicitly said. So like none of that stuff really sunk in the first time. But on the second watch, you see it again, and then you sort of imagine those scenarios, outside of the movie. So like seeing that couple going across the train tracks, you'd be like, oh my god, they must be absolutely bricking it at this point. And then you start to connect with them, and the movie doesn't help you do that, but it just kind of intimates at it, I think.
Yeah, it's strange as well, because if you do reflect on the anime connection again, a lot of the best animes do take the time to give you those little moments. There's kind of meditative, kind of quick snapshots of society or snapshots of humanity, and it's just one of the elements that's missing from this in a way, which is just like kind of peculiar, given the connection. But that's the way it is. I mean, overall, I thought this film was great. Honestly, I was really into it. Yeah. Which is why these things stand out more than they perhaps would otherwise, I think. Yeah. As negatives, because the positives were really strong.
I really wanted to hear more about Goro Maki. He had done his research because his wife had passed because of radiation. So he got obsessed with this, radiation mutations and stuff like that. And he'd kind of discovered that new element based on Godzilla's DNA. And then the US had halted his, research being published. So in this kind of last-ditch attempt to get his research out there and warn people and tell them what's going on, he had to kill himself and almost not make a spectacle, but make it known. Lay his stuff out there, and with that line, do what you will with this information. Yeah, that was really good. I would have liked just a little bit more, because I found his character actually very interesting, and I suppose there's only so much you can explore a character that isn't even in the movie.
Well, that's just the thing. They made the choice at the start to show the recovery rather than the suicide. If they'd gone a different way and shown like, oh, here's this guy preparing to kill himself, and like we kind of just infer that he's topped himself and whatever, then you could have had a bit of him talking to himself, like, oh, I'm going to do this or whatever. I don't know, recording some final thoughts or just speaking aloud to his deceased wife, something. I don't know.
But maybe it didn't need it then, because I still really liked that idea. And what he was there for. But no, it was really good. It was really good, and I just feel slightly annoyed that I went in with a different expectation when I saw it at the cinema, because I was expecting an action movie and it wasn't. So it wasn't until the second watch that I managed to get to grips with it.
I'm going to take a hint from your experience though, and next time we watch a Godzilla movie in the cinema, I'm going to try and have fewer expectations and see if I can just enjoy it a bit more.
I did want to ask you what your favourite moments were, but this is not the kind of movie where you have favourite moments as such.
No, I think the strongest part is when he does the atomic blast, and it lets you know, like, this is the movie. Yeah. If you're emotionally involved at that point, you get kind of the statement that's being made, and some of it still looks a little bit goofy, like we talked about with the effects. They're not perfect, but it is a good film, and it has a strong message, I think, for all its flaws. It's very strong.
Yeah, definitely. So
no quiz this time then.
No. I was thinking about it, but again, I don't know. Not the right atmosphere.
No.
I did like this more grounded representation, and it's entirely about radiation, and there's none of the mysticism or any of that, or any like big fights and things like that. I mean, as I said at the start, it's political drama featuring Godzilla, and they did it really, really well. And I say it did educate me a bit as well into the insights of Japanese politics. And so, as we normally say, if you're going to introduce Godzilla to someone, could you plonk them down in front of this, and would they have a good time? What do you reckon?
I think it depends on the person, and usually we answer this question quite broadly. Could you show this movie to anyone, and would they enjoy it? I think if you've got somebody who's into that David Fincher style with the fast dialogue, or they just want to watch something that's a bit more meditative than action-packed, this is probably the right movie to go with. Well, it might make a good kind of second Godzilla movie where you're like, okay, we're going to watch like something else that's more action-based, like King of Monsters, or one of the slightly goofier kind of older Godzilla movies with the the costume kaiju battles, and then to put this afterwards, you could say, okay, this is the full spectrum of Godzilla. You've got all of the fun and then all of the fear. And I think that maybe not first, but definitely you'd want to put this early on in your programming of introducing somebody to Godzilla.
It's generally better to have the clean slate movies as an introduction as well. And this is essentially a clean slate. It does make me wonder where they're going to go from here, because they from 2021, Toho want to start their own monsterverse, and it's like, at the minute it's called World of Godzilla, but it might change name.
Okay.
And I mean, this movie isn't part of that franchise as such, but I do wonder if they're going to do this kind of thing again, whether it's going to have that kind of, you know, political bent, or it's kind of, this is kind of the thing with Godzilla. You never know what to expect, like, because you can kind of think, oh yeah, Godzilla movies, yes, guys in suits fighting, but then we haven't covered that many so far, but I think there's been quite a few that are very different. As you said, you can get like different tones from each, you know, from each era essentially. So I mean, I'm really excited to see what they're going to do next, because I think for the Monsterverse, Legendary's Monsterverse, we know essentially what to expect.
Yeah.
You know, you might not know which monster will pop up or something like that, but you know, the tone is going to be basically the same. But yeah, for Toho, it seems to be markedly different with each generation.
I think you kind of, that's the thing you want. We talked about this before, didn't we, where sometimes Godzilla is friendly and sometimes he's not. And I think sometimes that can irk you as a viewer, like, oh, I like it when Godzilla's a friend, and then in this movie he's a villain, and, you know, it kind of might you know, not be what you're interested in. So they flip-flop quite a lot in the Toho ones, even within their singular era. They kind of go back and forth quite a bit. I would expect them to go with something that has quite a lot less teeth in the next Japanese Godzilla, because they've done this now and they've done it very, very well. So there's no real need to keep, you know, banging on this drum. They'll probably go with something that's a bit more, you know, populous next time, which is fine.
If they are indeed sticking with 2021, maybe we'll see something this year, like a
trailer or something.
Yeah, trailer, something like that, or even a poster. I don't know. I'm excited to see what they're going to do.
In our modern internet world, we might be fortunate enough to see a film like that land on Netflix like straight away, or maybe they'd even give it a limited release in world cinema, because, you know, potentially, I think distributors of world media everywhere are more knowledgeable of, like, oh, we've got fans everywhere, and, you know, with digital distribution, you can get a film to other territories a lot cheaper than you used to be able to.
Yeah, because distribution of these movies in the UK is something else, really.
You're basically just waiting for the Blu-ray.
Yeah, basically. It's difficult.
The Blu-ray you got me is great. It's got 2 discs. One is English and one is Japanese, so you get peak video quality on both of those, you know, versions, with not compromising any data there. The special features are basically non-existent, but you do have some stuff to just put on, and it's like, okay, this is good. Haven't watched the English dub yet, because I wanted to watch the Japanese one for this, because usually I don't watch the Japanese version at all, like I said. But yeah, I was really impressed. It was a nice little set.
I mean, this is one of the movies where, I mean, we haven't watched it together, so I was quite excited to hear what you thought to it, actually.
That's nice.
Anything else you want to add, Graham?
No, just yeah. I would recommend this movie very highly. That's all, really. As would I. Good. Right. Where can they find you, Graham? If you liked this discussion, I have a YouTube series called Fossil Arcade, where I play retro video games and arcade classics, and there's also a Fossil Arcade podcast, which regularly features Ben and myself talking about video games. We recently did a quiz on the Fossil Arcade podcast, which I thought went really well, and you can play along. So if you like quizzes on your podcast, check out the Fossil Arcade podcast. Excellent. And if you want to get in touch with us about Godzilla, we have Twitter account, it's Monster Island RP, and on Instagram it's Monster Island Radio, and we also have a YouTube channel now, which is also called Monster Island Radio, and we'll put the episodes up on there with a nice little radio animation, which for you to all enjoy, designed by Graham, and it looks fabulous. So yeah, check us out. So I want to see a picture of the Godzilla statue on that Instagram, and people, go look at it. You could go find it, and you'll know exactly what we were talking about. Are you telling me to post it? Yeah. Okay, cool. Right, I'll do that after this. Right. Okay, until next time, everyone. Bye.